All right, welcome everyone to Talk Flicks with Boss Chicks. And today is a very special episode because it's my birthday.
Cumpleaños feliz, cumpleaños feliz.
In addition to that, we have some special people on the show today. So let's introduce them. So first, we have Mrs. Victoria Krause. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
She is a writer, director, producer, and assistant director. We've worked on several projects together, including one of my most selected festival film, Unarmed. So thank you for being here, Victoria.
Thanks for having me.
Also, we have John Fannin. He is a Marine vet. He is a writer. He's an ocean rower, and he is the former bubble butt champion. He got dethroned at Grunt Fest a few years ago, but it's okay because we still love him. So thank you for being here, John. And Chris was here. We had one more person on the panel, but he had some technical difficulties. So hopefully he can work them out. But if not, we'll just press forward. So today we are talking about a documentary called I Am Not Your Negro, directed by Raoul Peck. And it basically chronicles the life of James Baldwin as he is writing his memoir. I think it was his last memoir before he passed away. And so this film really deals with race relations in the United States. And I think it was very fitting because it kind of seems like to me we're kind of in this perpetual circle where like we make some progress, but then we kind of end up in the same place where we're still not content. We're still not optimistic about how things are going as far as, you know, justice and race relations and equality in this country. So the documentary actually starts off with a question. And it says, it was a guy interviewing James Baldwin. He says, "Why is the Negro not optimistic?" And I thought that was an interesting way to start this documentary because I feel like, you know, he asked that question, I think it was like in the 1960s when he was being interviewed. And I feel like today we're still kind of not quite optimistic because we kind of see the same thing happening over and over again. And so you kind of, as you know, a Black person, you really just kind of get to a point where you're like, are we ever going to actually make it or get there? And I can honestly say, as someone who has been an advocate for equality, whether it's for, you know, African Americans or for Hispanics or for anybody, I can literally say that I do feel like something is a little bit different, particularly with this movement after, you know, particularly after the George Floyd event, where you just see a more broader coalition of people who are wanting to stand, you know, with and for their brothers who feel like they are treated unfairly, or it's not equality, or they're not being able to play on a level, you know, playing field. And so that's something that really kind of gives me hope, and, you know, that is different from, I feel, how, you know, Black people back then felt, where it was just like, you know, they're making these 2 steps forward, but then, you know, they kind of get stomped down and it's kind of like taking a few steps back. So I wanted to pose the question to John. What were some of the things that you really kind of got from this documentary that really were kind of like enlightening to you?
I don't want to say there was a lot that was enlightening to me, because there's a lot that I knew. I like to, one of my hobbies is history, and I like unfiltered history. I don't like history that just tells, you know, one side of the story. So what was going on, I knew a lot of, and I recognized that, you know, there was a lot of, and I don't want to say that something was particularly enlightening, but something that I think that we should all recognize is when you saw the scenes of people protesting the desegregation of schools, when you saw people holding up swastikas and doing all these things, right? We're not so far removed from that. Those teenagers and kids that you saw with those hateful attitudes, you know, they're in their 50s and 60s today. They are what we would call probably, you know, like our parents' generation, or maybe,
Yeah,
you know,
like literally
generations
my
past that.
parents
And so
lived
there's
in that,
and so they're
in that
still
era.
around, and they're still holding a lot of not just wealth, but a lot of influence. And so people ask, they come to me and they say, you know, why is it still bad? Like, we saw this in the 60s, didn't we? And I'm like, well, you know, yes, but also no, because you saw how widespread and pervasive those attitudes of white supremacy were. And you think, wow, man, that was in the past. But the truth is a lot of those people are still around. A lot of those people are still alive. They still have jobs. They're managers, they're directors, they're vice presidents. Some of them may even be, you know, congressmen, senators, or city councilmen, or whatever across the United States. They all probably are in that period of their lives. And so when people say, you know, why wasn't this solved in the 60s? Like, no, it wasn't solved, because the people you saw identifying with white supremacy, you know, we often think that it's a very fringe movement, but it's not. There's a lot of secret racists that, you know, if you remember watching American History X, right? Some of the kind of covert racism that turned Edward Norton's character as a teenager into who he was as an adult, like, it wasn't outright racism. It wasn't, you know, some of those things that were boldly, you know, calling people the N-word and going and lynching and doing stuff, but it was very undercover, small racism that built and built and built to uh, resentment by Edward Norton's character, right? And you have, I think you still have a lot of that today, because my generation, like my parents aren't those people, right? But my parents were born in 1950. You know, they were 18 in 1968. So these people are still around that held those things. And so what I've known, and I think the rest of the world should be enlightened to, is that the people that you see in that movie that hold those white supremacist, racist views, they're not gone. They're just more covert. They're more secretive. They're undercover, you know, and they're planting small little seeds of racism. They're not, you know, throwing these big trees saying, like, you know, racism right here. They're planting very small seeds in people to foster that hate. And there's a saying that I believe in. It's that you will find the enemy that you seek. You will also find the friend that you seek. And when people plant those seeds of white supremacy and racist behavior, they start to look for an enemy. And oftentimes they'll find them. They will find every example to confirm their negative beliefs about people. They will find the enemy they're looking for. I use the analogy of a seed on purpose because, you know, it's like tending a garden, right? There are some seeds that are good seeds. I'm about to plant some citronella and lavender in my backyard because I have a buttload of mosquitoes. Every time I'm out there for like 5 seconds, right? Those are good seeds. But there's also weeds and, you know, other grass that isn't good. And so I need to tend that garden. I need to look in there and see what seeds and what things are taking root and taking hold, and prune them accordingly, right? Keep the things that are good and right and noble and just, and remove the things that are stereotypical, prejudiced, hurtful. You know, we could probably name thousands of negatives, but I think we all get the point. We're all intelligent people here. You know, and that's why I use the analogy of the seeds, is because we have to constantly be, if you let a garden grow and you never tend it, you never go out there and look at it, you have no idea what's growing in your heart. You have no idea. So a vigilance on your own thoughts and your own mindsets and what's taking hold in your heart, I think, is extremely important. I don't think that's something that we as a society do at all.
Yeah.
We don't
Absolutely.
have the nerve. We don't have the courage to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, this is what's wrong with me, and I need to fix this,
Yeah.
because I'm having some wrong thoughts about either myself, other people, or whatever. We lack that courage. We lack that spine to say, this is my fault, my responsibility, and I need to fix it.
Yeah. Victoria, let's bring you in on the conversation, girl.
Okay.
So
I have some thoughts. I've got some ideas. I don't just have great hair right now. So I do hear what you're saying, and I mean, it makes a lot of sense, honestly. I feel like, yeah, it is a circle. So saying what you said, I have Facebook that reminds me of posts that have happened previously, and it actually reminded me before the election last time about the whole situation kind of coming back up. And the fact that it was the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter discussion. And it's the same thing that's going around again, and it's the same thing that we're seeing. And I am kind of curious to know, too, with the fact of this being correlated within just us having the election, because it's a specific timing. It's about to come up. We've got a lot of people that are unhappy with, who's in power right now. And I do feel like a lot of the media is pushing a specific narrative on kind of inflicting fear, because it feels very fear driven. And I do agree with the fact that there has been a culture that has been suppressed for a period of time, and that is a fear. I would assume I never had to go through something like that, but as a culture, if you had to go through something, where you were repressed and you didn't have thoughts and ideas, and people just treated you horribly, seeing things like this would put an idea that, hey, like, I don't want to be back in that situation. I can relate with that person. I feel like we need to stick together. And I think that that is kind of what's driving. So I did do a lot of research on this and found out that a study, and I think we discussed this before, but found out a study that if we were to, look at the facts, a lot more white people have died at the hands of cops versus a lot of Black people that have died at the hands of cops. Not saying racism involved, I'm not talking about statistics, just specifically on people dying. And I think that was the discussion that we had before was, well, that's because you have a more majority of whites versus Blacks. So obviously there would be more, a lot of white people. So why aren't white people upset? Right? Why, if this is an issue, why are there more white people upset? And I was doing some more research and some studies, and there was a study that I thought kind of made some sense with it, saying people of different cultures internalize versus compartmentalize. So because a lot of white people haven't had, racism go on, there's no reason for them to internalize it and feel like it's something that could attack them or it could hurt them. So they're not mentally thinking like, this is going to be something that I need to be fearful of. It's a different type of mentality. And so I think that it's really important, and I think it's really important to be educated on knowing what's really going on and how we can specifically target this. And I think that's what everybody's kind of trying to figure out, like, why are we having these issues? Because yes, unfortunately, I mean, there is racism, unfortunately. And like John was saying, being aware and like checking yourself and making sure, like, hey, was that okay to say? And I think for me too, like, I just say what I think, and I need to make sure that it's okay. So I'll call somebody that has totally different views, that comes from a totally different background, and be like, hey, listen, this is my thoughts. Is this, can I say this out loud? Is that okay or not okay?
no, it's not okay. It's not okay.
Okay, I'll shelf that one, and I'll try to come up with something else. But I do think that that's important, because, everybody in general should be respectful of people's, where they come from, because you don't know. You have no idea. So I obviously associate with white. I'm very white. I look very white. Both my grandparents came over on boats, both sides. My grandfather, who's white, picked cotton. So I have like zero. I don't really can relate with a different type of like mentality of being ingrained, like you were saying, on your friend, on you know, that culture. And I think that culture, honestly, I think, or not the culture, I think that wave of our grandparents is kind of like starting to kind of die off a little bit more. So they're not, you know, because you have a lot of grandparents raising grandkids. And so those kids now are being brought up by their grandparents who went through a lot of stuff that we didn't go through. And so that's also something that, you know, my husband was talking, so James was talking about that. Like, hey, they're going to be dying off soon. So that should cut down, hopefully, some of the, and we can move on. Hopefully that's the plan. So
evil people never die, by the way. Evil people just live forever. Evil people live forever. So, like, I don't even get my hopes up. But going back to what you said about, like, the whole Black Lives Matter thing. I feel like it's interesting to me because, like, I remember when Black Lives Matter first kind of came out, I think it was like after like the Trayvon Martin incident, and people were kind of like trying to almost like label it as kind of like an extremist group or something like that. And then like now, you know, after what happened with George Floyd, you see it come back, and then like there's a more receptive mentality to like, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter. Oh, in order for all lives to matter, Black lives have to matter too. So I just think it's interesting. I was like, did you guys notice that shift, or do you feel like?
No, I do. I think that you can tell a huge difference from where it was before to where it is now, and how many people are like really starting to kind of get behind a lot of what's going on and understanding the concept more. And I think that's why, is because they're having more open conversations with seeing themselves in another person's shoes.
I'm gonna have a question for both of you guys because you had brought this up, Victoria. So like about the police brutality, you're like, you know, white people may not feel the same way because, you know, I guess they don't experience it the same way. But are white people mad about this? Like, I feel like, yeah, like in general, like, yes, but like, I feel like there's still kind of like a disproportionate amount of white people who are not mad about this. And I feel like because the police, they police like whole communities, your community, my community, like we all should be upset. We all should be demanding higher standards because, you know, at some point it could be you, like they're just being too aggressive and end up killing you or your son or your, you know, relatives. And so I feel like there needs to be equal outrage because of the fact that these are, you know, public servants. Like if I do my job and I do it egregiously, like I'm fired, like I can never be a teacher again because they'll take my license away or whatever. Versus with, you know, some of these cops who have, you know, been in these incidents where they've killed people, they can actually get a job as a cop again in a whole nother department. And then it's kind of like, you know, whatever. And then just with the Derek Chauvin guy who killed George Floyd, like he had like a rap sheet that was like super long. And it's like, how was he able to stay a police officer and you have all these complaints, all these, you know, grievances against you? And it's like, we all need to be like, no, actually, you can't do this. And I feel like there needs to be a really established and universal consequence for when these things happen, because it's like, okay, well, you know, this person went to jail, but then this person got off, and this person went to jail, but this person didn't, and nothing ever happened. And so like I feel like we all need to be equally outraged and promote actual legislation to where it's universal for all cops all over the country.
So oh, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, a comment on the fact that you know, something that I'm really actually grateful for that's kind of taking steam is the movement to end qualified immunity, which is a statute that basically protects public servant from being sued or being found negligent or anything like that. I'm probably butchering the definition, but basically it protects public servants in the event of any wrongdoing. Public servants being police officers, city council, mayors, et cetera, and it's a very prime example of a law for thee, but not for me when it comes to policing. And one of the problems that goes with that is, like you said, these guys, they do these egregious, horrible things, and then because of qualified immunity, can't be held accountable. You know, they either just get fired or they relocate or something less than justice happens.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say that I feel like it's kind of hard. So first off, I'm gonna address your question, and then I'm gonna go on about kind of a little bit more on what you said. But so your specific question is, why isn't everybody mad about this? Whites, are they upset about this as well? So first and foremost, I honestly don't feel like it should be a race issue. If you have a soul and you are a caring human being, or just a human being in general, that should affect you. Absolutely. I don't think it should be a whites versus blacks thing. I think it's a human characteristic thing. This is a human being. He has a family. He has a mom. His mom is, I'm a mom. I have a son. So I'm automatically thinking of his mom and how she would feel and how I would feel as a, so just having those feelings as a human being, yes. I think globally, yes, everybody is upset, but I feel like they respond differently. So there's people that are, again, like I said, internalizing or maybe compartmentalizing how they're responding with it differently, and how they're dealing with this is kind of different if it affects them. So feeling like, is this going to be something that will be affecting me? Yes, I do feel like it would affect you, because regardless, like I said before, and I didn't say this on here, but I told you before. So my concern is that automatically I do feel like this was a specifically targeted as a race issue. I've yet to see if this was a specific race issue or if this cop just wasn't a total jerk. Like, I mean, I want to say other words, I guess we could go on. I'm just going to be PC. But let's just think of the worst possible thing we can think of, and that's what this cop was. And the fact of the matter is that he was a jerk. He had a rap sheet of being a jerk. I am concerned that why he was not specifically called out on this. Why wasn't this put to an end? That is a concern. It's a legitimate concern. I feel like I think anybody would be, if I was in that situation, or anybody else, because he's hyped up. He has an adrenaline rush. The cop is being extra, and then you see people around him that did nothing, and that is also my concern. So I think that seeing this, and again, like John said, being a history buff, seeing this with history replaying itself, that's kind of my mentality, is the fact that you had a regime that was just like led like sheep, and they just did whatever, and that's a concern. So I get where you're coming from on saying that. Like, I totally get that, and yeah, that is a concern. I think that's something we need to discuss. But there's two sides to the coin. So as a teacher, you said as a teacher, right, you get in trouble, you get called out, you get let go. There'd be a lot. But the thing is I feel like this different with teachers versus cops. And I don't know, because I'm not in a cop's shoes. So I couldn't sit here, because I know a lot of really great cops. I do know a lot of really good cops. But I do know a lot of really good teachers. And a lot of good teachers, they never seem like that. I guess the education system has their back. They support them. They never seem like they support them. So like, I see a lot of times where the kid or the parent comes in and they just totally call the teacher out, and the teacher gets screwed half the time. And the teacher's usually right. Yeah, there's times where the teacher should get called out. I agree. I've seen that. But I feel like I want to support more of the teachers. So I feel like it's kind of like a, like, I don't know where it's supposed to be at, because you want to support teachers, right? You want to support cops. It's kind of like, what do we do? We've got cameras on cops now. Are we going to start putting cameras on, like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't know where we need to go from there.
So I'm actually going to be starting working on a documentary about the whole like good cop, bad cop thing, because I truly believe like the system in which they operate has been so corrupted that like a good cop cannot even be a good cop. Like, for example, even with, the George Floyd incident, where you have those cops who they weren't the ones on his neck,
right,
but they were not stopping the bad cop. And I've seen, well, actually, I know people who I'm actually going to be interviewing for this documentary where they have spoke up about, bad cops doing stuff. And they actually, got a lot of backlash. Some of them even got fired and all types of stuff happening. So it's like, to me, like the whole system has to be kind of like reformed in order for all cops to even just do their job efficiently. Like, to me, I don't even want to get into, what's a good cop, what's a bad cop, because like,
I kind of have an idea. I want to interject. I kind of have an idea.
You want to interject? Well, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
No, the system is corrupt. And so like, when a good cop tries to, stand above the fray or whatever, they kind of get chopped off at the knees. And so we have to, I feel, put legislation in order to where that won't happen. So where you can put in a complaint and, you know, something does happen about that complaint, you know, as you as an officer seeing something happen that shouldn't have happened. And you shouldn't feel like, oh, I just have to kind of go along with it, or, you know, I might be on the chopping block or whatever the case may be. And also, I just feel like
Absolutely.
there needs to be a higher standard for police officers as far as just not just training, but just like their experience. Like I feel like there needs to be a more in-depth training, something that really kind of weeds out those people who are not, because I feel like there's a lot of people who are cops just because like they need a job. They're not cops because they want to serve and protect the community. And so I feel like the training needs to be more geared towards weeding out bad cops, in addition to training cops to be efficient in their jobs.
And time again, we see in these videos that there are opportunities for officers to de-escalate. And rather than de-escalate, it escalates, right? And that's one of the things that we viewed as a training problem, because something I understand from my time in the Marine Corps and from training the Iraqi Army while I was in, and from just various other training things I've done with the volunteer fire department. Panicked, fearful people that lack self-esteem and training act out very violently and aggressively towards whatever the stimuli is.
Yes, totally
right?
agree. Mm-hmm.
And so when we see people like Derek Chauvin, and we see a lot of these officers that are super aggressive, what that tells me is this: they have low self-confidence,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have confidence in their training, and they probably didn't have a whole lot of training to begin with. And so what did they do? They reacted out of violence. They acted out with violence. I find it very interesting that while I was overseas in Iraq, that I could get blown up on a block and then go a block over and treat the family there with dignity and respect, right? That's what was expected of me as a Marine. There's a line in the movie Generation Kill, and the guy, one of the Marines says, "Man, I don't want to kill no farmer," right? And that was a very strong mindset for many of us overseas, is look, we're warriors. We bought into this warrior ethos and bought into this idea and this culture of we are warriors. We are our country's warrior culture. We are the Marines. You know, everybody looks upon us with pride and honor and all this stuff. We are warriors. And the last thing a warrior wants to do is fight somebody who's not a warrior. We wanted to fight the bad guys. We didn't want to fight, you know, Farmer John, who was trying to provide for his family. We wanted to fight the hardcore Al-Qaeda, JTJ, ISIS, whatever splinter group you want to call it. We wanted to fight them. We wanted to fight the fighters. And one of the things that I'm building to a point, one of the things with police officers is they've started to call themselves law enforcement officers. When I was growing up, they were called peace officers. There's been I feel like due to some of the policies and legislation that we put forth as a country, there's become a culture of it increasingly like these guys see themselves as warriors and, you know, fighters. And I think that's the wrong mindset to have for a police officer. I think they should be peace officers. They should be looking to help their community. And so, you know, like I said, there are several in each of these videos. You can stop it probably every 15 seconds and recognize that if these men had been trained, there are opportunities, instead of escalating, to de-escalate.
But I also feel like there is the mentality, though, for people where you were at to respect the Marines. They appreciate that y'all are there. They want you guys to help them out. There is a lot of more respect that you get there by local farmers and people because they know that you're helping them than they are here for cops in inner cities where they don't even want them. There's so
But why don't they want them? Like, it also go back to, I think, what John was saying, like, you have this perception of cops because of the way you've been treated. So that that
the way that
You
someone
look
told
for, you find the enemy that
or
you're
what
looking
somebody's
for.
told you. If somebody's
Yeah.
told you that, hey, I had this incident with a cop, and you explain that to your kid or you explain that to your brother or your sister, and they're going to start hearing these stories, then they're going to start understanding that, like, well, I don't want that to happen to me. So you get a bad misperception, just like anything else. If you were told something that was encouraging racism the same way. So racism as well as with cops, if people are going to sit there and keep telling you stories that have happened to them, maybe not necessarily you're going to start mentally thinking of cops as the bad guy. So yeah, they're not wanting cops to come in there. They would rather try to take care of it themselves or whatnot. But I'm just saying, like, I'm just addressing what John's saying as far as I agree with the training, but I also feel like it has a lot to do with respect. I feel like there's a lot
respect has to be earned. Like, you have to treat people with respect in order to get it. And in a lot of these inner cities, these cops, particularly in those areas, they kind of have this mentality where it's almost like they're battling the enemy when they go in there. Like, oh, these people are dangerous. It's just like what my friend Greg was saying. Oh, these people are dangerous. Like, I have to go like already with my hand on my gun, you know, because I don't know what's going to happen. And so, like, I think that's also part of it too. In addition to training, is that there needs to be an establishment of a connection between the cops and the communities that they're serving. Because if you don't have a connection, then you're more apt to, you know, act out of character and do stuff you're not supposed to do because you don't have a connection there. You don't have a real, genuine care for the people. So I think also it needs to be something where cops are put in communities where they're, you know, almost like forced to have a connection where, you know, they know the people who are there. So then it makes their job easier because when they're trying to find, you know, a criminal, people are more apt to say, oh, okay, yeah, I know what happened, whatever, versus being like, oh, no, I don't even trust y'all anyway, so I'm not going to help you.
Yeah, but I feel like it's give and take. I think that both people need to come together and go, hey, let's work this together. I feel like it seems like it's one way or the other, and there's push and pull. There's no like togetherness where it's unity. And I think that when you do come together as a unified like city, yeah, you do have that. And you have that a lot of places where there are great cops and they know their city and the city knows them and they trust them. But no, that's not a lot of places where we're having these issues.
Yeah. John, also, like, okay, so going back to what you're saying, like, okay, yes, it goes both ways. So let's say I am, you know, I go to a protest and then the cops show up in like, you know, army gear, like they're about to go to war with Al Qaeda. To me, that's sending a signal like we are not on the same team. Like, yeah, I'm a citizen, but you're coming at me like I'm actually the enemy. So like, I feel like I almost like the cops need to put the first foot forward because they are the ones that have the position or the authority to be like, okay, we're gonna start this off the right way. Because to me, like, I look at some of these images and I'm just like, you start the whole relationship off wrong when you come in that type of uniform. That, like, you're expecting a riot. I'm not saying you shouldn't have that gear, but if that's like the first encounter I'm having with you, like, I'm already creating these preconceived notions in my head that you're trying to attack and kill me. You're not trying to protect and serve me.
You find the enemy you're looking for. I think what both of you guys are saying makes a really strong case for something I hold as one of my core beliefs, and that's individualism. You know, with respect to knowing that there's a white community and knowing there is a black community and a Hispanic community and whatnot. It's not that I don't see race. I treat you as an individual. If you're cool to me, then I'm cool to you. I don't care who you are. Yeah, like, I know you're a black woman, but you know what? You're cool. And if you come up to me and you hit me in the face as our first interaction, then you know what? I'm going to treat you accordingly, you know, as well. And I think that one of the things that we do, and the whole reason that some of these negative attitudes on both sides exist, is because of, you know, something that we've been knowing about since we were children: stereotypes, right? Yeah. If you think that all cops are bastards, then your preconceived notion, you're gonna find that enemy that you're looking for. And if you think that all black men are dangerous, as your friend's dad said, or your friend said, right, then you're gonna find that in every black man. But if I walk up to you and I just treat you as a human being, I just treat you with the respect that you earn as being another living creature on this earth. You're more destined to be successful if you're cognizant that if you look for an enemy, you'll find him. But if you look for a friend, you'll find him too. Is you know, with respect, because I think it is racist to say like, oh, I'm colorblind, because then you ignore all of the history that has happened that has colored
I
people's
agree with that
perspective.
too.
But if you walk
what
up
you're
to
saying.
somebody,
I agree with that. I think that that's true for you to understand because there's a lot of different cultural backgrounds in every different culture. And so to embrace that and to embrace that culture is that person. And I hear what you're saying, but I think when people say that, I'm hoping what they mean is that they're not going to sit there and in their mind, they're just thinking like a kid, like, I don't care, you're cool, whatever, move on.
yeah.
But I did want to address the whole riot situation. And I think that it makes sense when you say like they're coming at you like Al Qaeda. Like it's the fact is that the riot gear is specifically set up because there is rioters. There's violent rioters. So they give a warning for a 10-minute warning to let people know that they need to be clearing the streets. And they're doing that specifically to police that area so that it would be safer for the storehouse, for the stores, for the businesses, for the owners, for the people that actually, that's where they live, that's where they're doing their business. So I do feel like that's also kind of unfair because police officers have actually been attacked through the riots. I saw a video where a police officer wanted to come in and help somebody that had been trampled over by the riots. And as they came in to do that, then his police car started getting violently attacked, broken into, and it became unsafe for the police officer. So when it becomes an unsafe situation, riot gear is going to come in because they're not able to keep the situation contained. So they have to take extra measures, and that is honestly because of the people that are there. But if there were silent protesters and there was, riot gear going on, I think that would be a different situation where I would be like, hey, let's pose that question. I don't think that makes a lot of sense at all whatsoever, because silent protesters or protesting where you're being unviolent, absolutely. I think that everybody's voice is important and they should be able to say what they need to say.
So going back to what you were saying, so we've all seen videos about everything. So we've seen the cops being attacked. We've seen the peaceful protesters being attacked. Like we've seen everything. And so I think, because actually in the documentary kind of talked about like the ideology of Martin Luther King versus that of Malcolm X, like when he first kind of started to pop on the scene, where he was more like enemies necessary, versus Martin Luther King was just like about, peaceful sit-ins, civil disobedience and stuff. And like, as I was watching it,
against rioting specifically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, you kind of have like, in order for there to be movement, like, because I feel like we've seen some movement, within these last few weeks, like the officers that were, involved with, with George Floyd, they were charged and arrested. The officers with the Rashad Brooks incident, like those officers were also arrested and stuff like that. So, but I feel like the movement only happened because there were instances where there was looting or whatever, and people are like, oh, these people are really upset, like we actually have to do something about this. And I feel like it's almost like people don't hear you until you get really loud. And so like the rioting and all that stuff was like the people getting really loud. Like there was protests, but then like in order for there to really be movement, like it had to get really loud. And it was like, you had to see, that, oh, actually, if you don't give us the justice and equality that we want, we're going to tear stuff up. And then people are like, oh, we don't want that. So let's, look into this and try to actually give them what they want. So I feel like with both ideologies, I feel like you almost have to have a combination of both for things to actually start moving forward.
I hear you, but as a parent, I have to completely disagree with that mentality.
As a parent?
To throw a fit and be like, but that's not what I want, and start throwing something around.
But you paid attention to him. No. You realize he wants something.
I'm going to get my riot gear. I'm going to get my riot gear, and we're going to throw down because that is not happening. So I can't agree with that though, because I feel like you're encouraging a negative reinforcement. So you're saying I'm going to give you what you want.
You have to have both.
Out.
I think as a teacher, there's times where I have to use positive reinforcement, and then there's times where I have to use negative reinforcement. And one isn't necessarily better than the other. It's just the situation requires certain things. So I think in the same, instance with this, like sometimes peaceful protest can really get you a long ways. Like it can get you things that you want. And then other times people are not listening to you. So then you have to kind of up the ante a little bit. And I'm not advocating for people to hurt other people, but like you have to understand, like when people are literally like fed up and it's like you keep seeing this happen. Like for example, my mom, like they lived during the civil rights. They were one of the people who couldn't drink at a water fountain because it said whites. I'm like, that's just one generation removed from me. So when she's seeing these images again where, these cops are beating people, like actually in the documentary, they talked about a cop putting his knee on a woman's neck. Did you catch that, John? I don't know if you caught that part.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, wow, that was happening back then. I like, this is just them cycling the same stuff over again. And so when you see that, you've been seeing that for 50 plus years, you're not going to be a peaceful protester anymore. Like you're going to actually take it up a notch because you're kind of tired and you really want change at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it totally makes sense because when I think it's a smart thing to say that you need both because and not that I'm advocating for people to loot and riot and burn everybody's stuff and whatnot, because I'm a big advocate of like private property rights and whatnot and so on and so forth, but that's a whole other thing. But one of the things that I very strongly believe is if you're a white supremacist, your mindset is that Black people are less than. And so when they peacefully protest, you're like, oh, well, we're just going to walk all over them. Like, they're peaceful. They're not going to do anything.
Right.
And so from that mentality comes a more aggressive mentality, right? That's like the situations kind of breed each other, so to speak. And it's not to say that either one is right, because like I said, I'm not an advocate of looting or rioting or anything, but when, as you said, peaceful protests only got you so far before you felt like your community was being walked on, well, it's only rational to know what's coming next. You're not advocating something by saying, I bet that if these peaceful protests don't get the results they want, that something more intense is going to follow, because people, when they feel they're not being listened to, they tend to ratchet up the intensity. And that's true across all boards, whether Iraqi, whether Korean, whether Black, whether white. If you feel you're being ignored and you're trying to be a cool guy about the whole thing, and people continually push you around and walk all over you despite your peaceful intent and actions, as a mild student of psychology, I can tell you what's going to happen next, and people are not going to like it. If my people had been getting oppressed for the last 400 years, you damn sure better believe that I think I'm justified in pouring fuel on the fire, right? Like, but the other guy, maybe if the other guy stops pouring fuel on the fire, maybe the other guy will realize there's no need for a fire anymore, and it's just, you're dealing with human reaction that's very predictable. When people, like when your kids, whether in your classroom, Crystal, or in your home, Victoria, when they feel they're not getting listened to, they ratchet up the intensity, right? It's not saying that it's right, but it happens.
Right.
And that's a natural human reaction that we have to be cognizant of.
Right, and I do feel like as a mom though, or where I'm at in my area, I do feel like it's important for me to listen, and I think that that's something that I obviously agree with, and I think that's what we're doing right now is listening. But as far as like, I hear what you're saying on the intensity level, on getting an actual like shock and awe, like get the attention. But I feel like as society, we should be able to rise above it. We are educated enough to know to call our senators. We are educated enough to know to call our governors. We are educated enough to be able to go ahead and go door to door if you need to, and you can go ahead and everybody can get real political, and they can go to the Capitol, they can go have a discussion, they can go sit there and agree with what they do or what they don't. So I feel like there are ways of being heard and not having to sit there and break stuff or throw a fit. They can be very educated about it, and I guarantee you, when you sound educated and you know what you're talking about and you tell people this, they're going to listen. And your voice is very powerful because they're like, hey, listen, they're making a lot of sense. I can
But look how long that takes, though. Look how long that takes. Like,
not long.
Somebody throws a brick, and all of a sudden they're like, oh snap, yeah, we're gonna put these people in jail. Versus I have to knock on doors, I gotta go to the Capitol building, I gotta organize all these people. That's too much time. This brick will get me so much further.
You know, break at somebody's house, you're obviously going to be like possible in Texas, you're possibly gonna get shot. I'm just saying. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think that's another new situation. I'm just saying.
And just to play devil's advocate here, you know, when you said that when you sound educated and you sound like you know what you're talking about and you do things peacefully, people will listen. Yeah, I agree with that to a point, because did Martin Luther King die of old age?
Martin Luther King was specifically a brilliant person. He's a legend today.
Yeah.
He obviously started a lot of reforms that were never before. Of course, people are knocking down his door. They're doing that to anybody that has a big voice. So that's what you gotta do.
And that's why I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to say that, you know, sometimes that people that are peaceful, no matter how peaceful they are, no matter how educated they are, violence still comes to them.
Going back to that, okay, so this is what I think people are missing. People are protesting, throwing bricks, whatever their form of protesting is, because a basic right is not being given. Like, these cops are, particularly like in the George Floyd case, I'm still kind of making up my mind about what happened to Rashad, but the cops, it took so many days for them to even be arrested. And it's like, these people would not have had this luxury if they were just not in a uniform. And so we're asking is, we want everybody to be treated the same way. If I had to put my knee on your neck for 9 minutes, I would have been in jail. I deserve to be in jail and, you know, charged, whatever. Like, I feel like the problem is people are not seeing that people have been traumatized, brutalized, and the people who are perpetuating this get no consequence. Like, to me, this is all about equal treatment. Like, if you're a cop, okay, but if you break the law, you go to jail or have the same consequences I do if I break the law. And so we're seeing it from a perspective of, if you have on a uniform, you can do these things and you kind of, you get away with it. And that's, for our community, something that we can't just sit by and just be like, oh, I'm going to peacefully do this. Like, no, this person needs to be put in jail. Like, this is basic. Like, this is not a big ask. And so I think that's why people get upset faster and probably even more aggressively, because it's like, yo, like, what are we talking about? Like, there's literally nothing to talk about. Like, we see the tape, what he did, it was wrong, it was a crime. This should basically already be a closed case. Like, there shouldn't even be all this extra waiting time. And that's another thing, like, why do we have to wait so long for justice? Like, it's too much, especially when you have a whole tape showing you exactly what happened. Like,
what do you want? What do you want to happen, Let me just ask that. Let me ask you, what do you expect to happen? Because he is in jail. He has been put in jail. There is most likely going to be a situation where he's probably going to get the death penalty, but he is answering for his crimes.
Do they have the death penalty there?
I'm sorry.
I don't think.
I don't know if they have the death penalty there.
Then life. Like, there's two things when you kill somebody: life or death penalty. I always say death penalty. I'm from Texas. I mean,
I agree with you. I'm totally on board with you.
I think the same thing should happen when you take a life or you rape somebody. I think the same thing should happen to them. The family should all get a big giant stone. The community, everybody that knows that person that happened to it, and just stone them down. I'd feel better about it. I sure as heck would feel better. I think everybody should feel better about it. But what do you want to happen? Because that is what's happening. And I agree, it's super egregious. I think that's the right word to use. that's what happened. It sucks. There's no way of making up for that. But the thing is that is what happened. Unfortunately, we live in a world where there's really shitty people that do shitty stuff, and the most that we can do is have them answer for their crimes, which he is answering for his crime. So what exactly are you?
But look what it took, though. Like, go back and like literally, people had to basically burn the city down for them to do what is the right thing. Like, to me, that is also part of the whole systemic racism and just injustices, because it just takes so long for the right thing to be done when it's like obvious, like no one should be against this guy being thrown in jail. No one really should be against him getting the death penalty, even though they don't even have the death penalty in so he should be given the death penalty anyway. I feel like can I say this one thing?
Yeah.
I feel like the only way forward is for him to actually get the death penalty, because there is, for one, it sets a standard or a bar to say, hey, like when you do stuff like this as a cop, you will get the ultimate consequence. Like, we're not gonna let you get away with this. And two, it sends the message to the community, like, yeah, we see this is happening, and we are gonna make sure people are doing stuff the right way by you. So I feel like in order for us to move forward, that is really the only acceptable consequence is death.
But a white cop in jail for life, I'm sure is going to get screwed.
And he's taking up taxpayer dollars, feeding him and clothing him. So that's why he needs to die. Penalty. This is why I'm saying death is the only answer.
On the death penalty, stoning. I think we should just stone people. I don't understand why that's a bad idea.
I want to interject with a little something here. Like, one of the things that a lot of people will hear where my stance is on this, and they'll be like, wow, like, you must hate cops. And I'm like, I actually really respect cops. And where it comes from is we have given members of our society special privileges and special authority that other citizens don't have. And I know I'm quoting Spider-Man when I say this.
Wait, which Spider-Man?
But with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. When we give people, Victoria, when you I don't know how old your children are, but when you let your son or daughters drive, eventually, there's going to be some added responsibility that comes with that privilege, is there not? Absolutely, right? So when we give people a badge and a gun and allow them to have the authority to arrest and detain and possibly even kill their fellow citizens, we should be holding them to a much higher standard than we hold the average citizen, because the average citizen hasn't been trained. The average citizen doesn't have those privileges. And as bad as the average citizen can be, that's part of the job. I agree with you. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was dating a young lady who was of a certain faith. I'm not gonna blast them, because that's not, it was an individual. But I went to her place of worship with her. One of her instructors found out I was in the Marine Corps and decided to lecture me on how what we were doing was wrong, how we were baby killers, how we were monsters. And mind you, I hadn't even deployed yet, right? And me being fully capable of sitting there and just beating the ever-living dog crap out of this guy for all these horrible things he was saying about me and about the people that I served with. I just sat and took it. Because, and you know what? Like maybe I'm a bitch for doing that, but I guarantee you it wouldn't have looked good if I, a trained U.S. Marine, went wholesale, opened up a can of whoop ass on a minister of sorts from a faith. Like, I can see the headline now: U.S. Marine beats up, pastor, rabbi, imam, whatever. That would not have been a good look. And so in the same way, I ask police officers, I'm like, think of your brothers, think of the other people that are out there holding the thin blue line, and ask yourself, do you individually want to contribute to painting them in a negative light, or do you want to be an exemplary example of how policing should be?
When we were talking about, you were specifically talking about it when you said that cops have a higher responsibility. That is 1,000% true. That is completely accurate. But I do feel like as a cop, I'm a CHL owner, they specifically teach you not to ever use your gun. The objective is never to use it, because if you use it, the consequences are, even if you're right, even if you're 100% right and you are getting raped or someone's trying to kill you, you are taking a life. You have to stand before a jury. You have to stand before a jury, and you have to hope to God that they are on your side. But here's the deal. The thing is that you would rather be able to protect yourself than do nothing. And so, yes, there is a lot of cops out there that, suck, and they are very crappy, but there are thousands of cops that are amazing. And I just wanted to sit here and say, though, without cops being able to protect our neighborhoods, without cops, without calling 911, hey guys, y'all have a gun, I need some backup, because maybe that's what's going down. I need somebody to sit here and police the situation. I think that instead of us having a bad rap sheet for cops that are like bad apples, they should be taken out. I think that you're right. We're shining light on the fact that, hey, we're starting to see this. It's more of a society sometimes where there's a lot of people that need to be weeded out. We also have a lot of really crappy judges that could also be just racist. That would be the next thing. But we could talk about this with everything. We could talk about the actual death statistics with doctors. Doctors kill people all the time. There are malpractice suits, lawsuits all the time on doctors. Doctors, I don't think care race or whatever, that there's lots of people that die at the hand of doctors. I'm just saying, in general, when you have that responsibility, so doctors having that responsibility, you need to take it personal, and there should be a situation where people are like, hey, this is what matters. But I just feel like bringing it all back, yes, I think that it's really ridiculous of what happened. No, I don't think that this specific incident was a race issue. I do feel like it was he's a complete jerk, and I don't understand why we got to this situation the way that it was. And I agree with, I think that what makes me angry is that nobody did anything in that time frame. Nobody did anything. And like you said, John, if you're the one person that would have stepped out and done something, you could have gotten killed right there, but you knew that it's right. So I feel like it's just humanity being a human and not trying to look out for yourself, but look out for others. And I think if we start encouraging other people to start actually caring about others and really stepping out there, I think there would be a lot more changes.
I'm gonna have to interject and say that it is a race issue, because even if you go back to this documentary, the cops were doing this all the way, since the beginning, literally back, in slavery days, cops were legally contracted to go and find and kill runaway slaves. That whole mentality has been ingrained in the police. Police has never really had a real reform. They've never really had a real reform. And so it's just with the bad seed, it just kind of, germinates, and it kind of moves over to other, generations of this. And I feel like the fact that a man put his knee on a woman's neck in 1960s, and then we're seeing a man, or a cop rather, do the same thing in 2020, that to me is a race issue. It was a race issue back then because they were, oppressing the people trying to get their rights. And so the fact that we're still dealing with this same situation, literally, you can find pictures from the 60s that look just like what we just saw with George Floyd, with a cop with his knee on a Black man's neck. And it's a race issue because Black people literally are scared of the police. My sister literally told me, she was like, Crystal, if I ever find myself in trouble, do not call the police, call the fire department. Do not call the police, because they will probably end up killing me or you. We just call the fire department. And the fact that people feel like that and they're a certain race, it makes it a race issue. That's why, to me, it becomes more, it's a human rights issue, above all. But because of the history of it, that's why, to me, it's still a race issue as well.
So you're correlating this situation with what has happened before in the past. And that's what I was kind of saying, as far as internalizing versus compartmentalizing, like internalizing the idea that that could be something that you could relate with on happening to you, which I agree. And I couldn't see myself in that situation because I've never experienced that. And I've never been told that from my family because we have a different situation. They're Italian, so it's a lot different. Like they were just yelled at and, you know, talked down to, things like that. So I think that that's what I'm saying. The only reason I said this specific incident is because this specific incident, though, in my issue is that anytime you see a black and white, people have to correlate it like it's all of a sudden now it's a race issue. And I'm like, I get it, but is it though? Like, let's find out if that's true. Or if this guy wasn't just a complete jerk and this is a different situation. Then now we got to discuss it where, is this a bad cop or is this a good cop? Like what actually happened? What was the real facts? Because I feel like too, there's not a lot of media that's like really trying to get to the facts. I think the media is jumping on it faster than they're able to sit there and process the actual evidence and the facts. I think that's why it's taking a little bit longer, because people are like so quick on finding out what happens sooner than they used to.
I get what you're saying, that we don't know what was in Derek Chauvin's head. He may just be a prick. Like he may have put his knee on a white dude or any other dude's neck just because he's a prick. I get that that is a possibility. But in the same sense, with regards to perspective, understanding that used to happen in the 60s, right? Like, okay, we have that knowledge and we're like, hey, it may not be this, but it definitely looks like this. And then furthermore,
if it looks like, and if it is, it's different though.
It is, but you're not going to convince the masses. You're not going to convince the mass. No, I get what you're saying, and I think you're right. Like, intent does matter, but we're never going to know his intent truly because he has no reason. He has no reason to give us an honest answer.
But he was married to an Asian. He was married to an Asian. So I'm not saying that he's not, because we are not sure, but I'm guessing he might not be because he's married to someone that's not white. But still, there was no evidence saying this guy has a sheet of being racist. No, he has a sheet of being a jerk. And I
get that.
I don't feel like just because he's married to somebody that's Asian means he's not racist. Like I know people marry people below them, especially men. Like they'll do that so they can kind of have some type of control. So like I don't know if that really justifies anything.
I agree. I agree with that. And I'm not saying that just because, but I'm just saying like he doesn't look like it, because a lot of people stay within their culture. They're comfortable with that instead of getting out of their comfort zone. So usually when they do, I'm just saying maybe. But yeah, I agree.
No, you bring up a good point. And it's one of those things that we have to be cognizant of everything, right? I've come back to this 100 million times because it's my new favorite word, is that nuance. Maybe he was racist. Maybe he wasn't. Do you know how we controlled prisoners in Iraq? Once they were flexi-cuffed, like once they had their hands behind their back and flexi-cuffed, if they started giving us trouble or resisting, all we did is put them face down on the ground and lift up their arms. If they needed a little bit more, we put our knee in the small of their back. So a couple of things are happening there. One, that's incredibly painful. But two, none of that is life-threatening. None of that. It's painful and you're going to stop. If you're resisting, you're going to stop for sure. But you're definitely, I could hold that for 3 hours if I wanted. And you might be in some pain, but you're not going to lose your life. Whereas holding a knee on somebody's neck in their carotid artery, they're definitely going to suffer some long-term effects from oxygen deprivation to the brain. So to me, what sticks out about it is the inhumanity with which George Floyd was treated, right? Because to me, when you putting a knee on somebody's neck, to me, is the same as putting a boot on somebody's neck to me, right? It's an authoritarian, totalitarian, dictatorial type of move that illustrates power. It does, I think, to a degree, it does go back to the slave catching roots of certain departments where it is designed to make people feel less than human. He did it while staring in the face of onlookers who were recording him, and not even that convinced him to stop.
Yeah.
That, like, when I see that's, you know, he may be, like, I think jerk is too nice of
nice.
a word.
It is.
That's
It is.
too
I'm not
nice of
gonna
a
sit
word.
here and cuss and be like extra tacky. We all know that this guy was a complete
Yeah,
horrible
like
person. But I don't need to sit here and like
Yeah.
expand upon the fact that
Yeah.
this was off. I am on the same page.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
on
No,
the
I
same
just
page. I mean, I
and
can sit here
then
and tell you. Sorry.
But
No,
how is
you're
that? But look, this is what's more egregious, though, guys. The police department allowed him to keep being on the fort. Like, he's probably done this before. That's why his hand was in his pocket, because he was counting like, okay, last time I did it took about whatever. This one may be taking a little bit longer. So the fact that the police department is allowing these people to still be there is why my community has a problem with the police also. It's like, dang, like, what does it take for y'all to let a cop go? Like, y'all standards are so low that you let this dude just continue racking up complaints and all types of stuff and no consequence. Like, it's just, it actually blows my mind when I think about it. Like, what other job where like a public servant can you get away with this, and it's like forever and ever you just kind of keep, just doing these things and nothing happens? Like, I don't see this happening anywhere else.
Congressman, you can keep being shitty congressman.
That's true. That is true.
Until they die off.
And then, well, the other thing the thing that stands out to me, right, is now a lot of departments are coming out with these rules that are like, hey, no neon neck chokeholds. To me, that should have been a no-brainer. Like, duh.
Now we can't do that.
Yeah. We can't do it. Now we can't. Oh, now we have to write a law. This should have been duh, like a million years ago.
We could talk about it all day in the comfort of wherever we're at, our homes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a mass group of other people that were around that did nothing. And I think that also should be an issue. So let's not even talk about the cops. Let's talk about the people that we represent that did nothing, and say that if you were there, would you have done something? So that's where I'm kind of like, I think that is the issue on, you need to start really checking yourself as a human being and caring about others and putting yourself in their shoes and going, hey, today is the day. If my son's got to live, he's going to know that his mom is going to sit there and be like, we ain't going to live in a world like this, so I'm going to do something. Maybe don't know what I'm going to do, but we're going to do something, because not doing anything is really what's making, I think what's really making this a race issue.
Yes, I want to bring up this story of Elijah McClain, who had the police called on him merely for looking suspicious. And then he was injected with ketamine after what looks to be a 3-hour, 8-minute interaction with the police and the paramedics. He was injected with ketamine, pronounced brain dead, and died later on. When we talk about society, he was moving around. He had like his headphones in or whatever. He was dancing, and somebody thought he looked suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they called the police because of that. Like, how Elijah McClain would still be here today if some Karen just minded her own business.
Because I live in a really white neighborhood, and they kind of get in people's business extra stupid, and I don't understand. It really makes me angry. I'm sorry, but I can't even deal with people being in other people's business extra. Like, I get you watching out for your neighborhood, but like, if I'm like sitting here having an argument with my husband and it looks heated, don't like come up to me and be like, hey, how are you? I'm be like, are you kidding me right now? Does it look like I want to chat? Like, let's discuss the weather. No, I don't think so. Like, get out of
the
my
guy
way.
I made friends with yesterday, he could have been watching out for his neighborhood by interacting with me, but he did it as a friend, and then nothing happened, right?
Just like, what's up? Absolutely.
Exactly. Like, you see somebody that you don't know, hey man, what's up? Can I help you?
Absolutely.
That's a friendly way of doing it,
Absolutely.
and then they're not put on guard, they're not put on the defensive, because even humans, when cornered and accused, we tend to just be defensive.
So I'm gonna have to wrap this up, guys. We've been on the line for a long time, but I want you guys to think about something. This was something in the documentary, and it said, history is not our past, but it is our present. And I think the reason why we kind of keep repeating ourselves, kind of like in this, with race relations, is because we forget that the past is our present. History is our present. And when we forget where we came from, we're destined to repeat it. So I think that this is a great conversation. We need to, have more of these, because I think it actually helps us move forward. You know, you got to know where you come from in order to know where you're going.
That's
so
why we don't need to be tearing down these statues so that we
that's
can
what
remember stuff.
that's another conversation. That's a whole nother conversation. We'll have to come back to it.
So good.
So thank you all for tuning in to Talk Flicks with Boss Chicks. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to our channel. We'll be doing this a lot more. Peace.